Welcome to the Life Giver Marriage Podcast, a place for honest conversation and hope for your military or first responder marriage. This is your host, Corey Weathers, and I'm honored to share this journey with you.
Hi, this is Dr. John Townsend, and you're listening to Life Giver.
Hi, this is Taya Kyle, and you're listening to Life Giver.
Hi, I'm Shasta Nelson, founder of GirlfriendCircles.com, and you are listening to Life Giver.
Welcome to a very special edition of Life Giver. This is your host, Corey Weathers. You've probably heard me speak in the last month or so about a fantastic movie coming out called Indivisible. It's coming out in theaters October 26th, and it shares one of our true life stories with a current couple, actually, active duty couple, Chaplain, Darren Turner, and his wife, Heather. You may have even heard my interview with Heather a couple weeks ago where we talked about the ups and downs of military life and marriage, and specifically how deployment impacted their marriage and a turning point that they had in their marriage where they really saw the importance of pursuing each other again and really preserving their relationship. Well, I have a very special interview for you today with the lovely and talented Sarah Drew. You may recognize Sarah from her 9 seasons on ABC's medical hit drama Grey's Anatomy. She may also look familiar from her starring role in Mom's Night Out, starring next to one of my other favorite actors, Sean Astin. You may know him from Goonies and also from Lord of the Rings. So Sarah, I just want to say thank you so much for giving some of your very precious time. I know you've been very busy this season. And can I just start off by also saying thank you for really shining a spotlight on military marriages and marriages in general. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so we have lots to get into. You've had a very, very busy season. You have finished strong with Grey's Anatomy, and I mean finished strong. You also were nominated for an Emmy for your first time directing, actually, a short web series called B Team that highlights the interns of Grey's Anatomy. So I want to say congratulations on that nomination. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
And of course, let me also point out that not only did you star in Indivisible, but you also produced it. So very busy season. I know you've been talking a little bit about a lot of these transitions. So I'd love to ask you, how has this recent season been for you, considering it's been so full?
Yeah, it's been probably the craziest and most intense season of my professional life, for sure. Because I experienced actually the greatest heartbreak of my professional life, not my personal life, but my professional life, when I was let go from my family of 9 years. It was incredibly emotional and really hard, and I really grieved it. But there was also this like abundant outpouring of love and support, and it ended up being one of the sweetest times of my life, actually, in the midst of the sort of the pain and some anger and all of that stuff, and just sadness of saying goodbye. But it's really led to a season of like jubilant, life-giving joy. I in many ways, I think I was probably ready to move on, but it was too great of a job for me to walk away on my own. So in many ways, I feel like I was just removed from that situation to go into the next great thing. And thus far, it's been an incredibly vibrant, exciting time of my career with the Emmy nomination, and I just finished a movie in Vancouver that I had such a blast doing, had so much fun doing, and it's been a season of kind of testing the waters and taking up on more leadership responsibilities, and that has felt really, really life-giving for me. So yeah, it's been a wild time, pain, but beauty and joy and love, so much love. There's been so much love during this season of my life. It's wild. And I can't wait to see what comes next.
Well, do you feel that sometimes, I mean, you have 9 years is such a long time to carry on like one role and to be a part of this family. Do you feel like sometimes we often don't see what's next until like a door closes and another one opens, and then we can see the blessing and beauty on the other side?
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of faith that's required in the waiting, and the waiting is hard for me. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't, but it is a space that when a door is closed and you're in the in between, there's fear that creeps in, there's insecurity that creeps in, there's envy, comparing my life to other people who are doing something or working somewhere, whatever. There is all of these things can kind of creep in and attack during a season of waiting, but it can also be a really sweet time of reflection and of self-growth and of opportunities to pursue self-care, which I'm very bad at, and a sweet time to really invest and be present with my kids and my husband and my friendships. And I've, it was really in the last like 2 weeks since I came home from doing this film in Vancouver, it's the first time I've had a moment to breathe since I got the news that I was being let go. And that was back in March. So it's really been a pretty steady flow of insanity until just the last 2 weeks. And the last 2 weeks have been a tough transition for me, but I'm starting to really embrace the beauty in the waiting.
Tough is in slowing down just a little bit because you were moving so fast.
Yeah, for me, that's tough.
Yeah.
Because I'm not very good at resting. I'm not very good at self-care. I just don't do it very often. I haven't found the things that I know I can lean on to care for myself. And I feel very vibrant and alive when I'm on the move, when I'm on the go. And certainly the last month was just 100 miles an hour. So going 100 miles an hour to landing back at home and being like, I don't know what's next. It's a bit of there's a panic that rises, even though I know, number one, I know God is faithful because he has been and has continued to be and continues to show me that he is. And even though I know from a practical standpoint, I know I'm going to keep working. I still get gripped in the fear of if I'm not doing something right now, I'm not being valuable. And that's a big thing that I'm learning and growing.
Several things came to my mind just now. Number one, how many military spouses and first responder spouses I think can really relate to what you were just saying. I mean, we tend to be a community that does stay very busy and kind of grows comfortable with the chaos and the constantly changing variables that are happening in our life and sacrificing our own self-care. And it can be this kind of withdrawal feeling of when things slow down and actually thinking about taking care of yourself and the blessing that's there of just God giving you just a moment, maybe just to like enjoy the simple things, enjoy your family, enjoy that slow pace, and knowing that he's still going to take care of things on the other side. Is I think a difficult process that I think everybody will relate to. I was kind of, when I was preparing for talking with you, I was really like something that was heavy on my heart that I really wanted to ask you or at least talk to you about was April Kepner's story. The character that you played in Grey's Anatomy was such a very rich, full story. Carrying this character for so long, going through the ups and downs with whether it was her faith or whether it was life issues, relational issues. I just have to tell you that I think that this last season, your portrayal of April was unbelievable and flawless and gorgeous. And I just want to say thank you for doing such a great job and being excellent at your craft. My favorite scene, I think, of the entire series, and my husband and I have been fans from the beginning. We've watched Grey's Anatomy from the very beginning. We watched it throughout various deployments together and would use that as a way to, I know that sounds crazy, but we would use that as a way to stay connected and just kind of talk about, I would find a way back in 2009, even find a way to record it somehow and send it to Afghanistan. And then we talk about it over the phone. And So one of my favorite scenes was this past season when your character April really kind of hit this crisis of faith and really had this moment with the Rabbi Eli. It was a beautiful scene where he is about to pass away, but April is actually going through her own crisis of faith and having to make some very rich, big decisions on good versus evil, joy versus pain, the role of suffering in life.
Here we go.
Now, if people only believed in God when things were good, I guarantee you, after the Holocaust, not a single Jew would be a believer.
Okay, well, see, now you mentioned the Holocaust, and anything I say after that makes me...
A narcissist?
I was gonna say jackass. Okay, come on. Deep breath, please. Deep breath. There you go. Okay.
Faith wouldn't be real faith. You only believe when things are good.
So what? The world is just cruel and random, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Look, I don't have a lot of time here. Do you mind if I just skip the part where I pretend I don't know what to tell you? I'm just going to tell you, okay?
Okay.
You sound like a child.
What?
Terrible things happen. Terrible, wonderful, devastating things happen. Who the hell are you to know why? Who are you to know why some people live and some people die?
Children die. Children who didn't do anything wrong. Children who were broken before they had a chance to be whole, who were climbing in their own front windows.
Right, and you don't get to know why any more than I get to know why I'm dying from taking a pill that saves lives. It saves nearly everyone's life. And it's killing me. So you can either believe in God and goodness, or you can believe it's pointless, it's cruel, and it's random. Whatever makes you happier. Are you happy?
It's not narcissism.
And then what is it? Pain. Unimaginable pain. Yeah, I know the feeling. God's not indifferent to our pain. Listen, tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means that the world is full of brokenness, and it's our job to put it back together again. It assumes that the world is broken and in need and in pain. And it's our job to fix.
Eli, let me give you some more morphine. I can take away the pain. 1/60th of your pain. I can do that, please. Let me.
You already did. Oh, listen. Will you tell Dr. Bailey I forgive her? Okay? You'll tell her, right?
Eli, no. You have to hang on just a little bit longer. Elise is on her way. She's on her way.
Elise is here?
She'll be here any minute.
Elise. I love you.
Okay, Eli. Okay.
Oh, Elise.
I'm here.
I love.
I'm right here.
I love.
Your acting was so fantastic, but also because in this world of military and first responder life, I think that's one of the biggest issues that I see couples struggling with, is this role of how do I hold in my hand both good and evil? How do I hold in my hands the joy and the pain of life? And how do I also then wrestle in my faith? That's one of the biggest questions that I hear from a clinical perspective. I hear is, where is God in all of that? And so I remember taking that scene and going, this is teachable material. This is what can be used for people to walk through that. So I think my question for you really is, what has it been like for you to carry this character over 9 years? And because I know in acting, you kind of have to kind of live in this person's shoes a little bit in order to string that story along. What was that like for you? And maybe what was that moment for April like, and portraying that moment for April like?
Yeah, it's been a tremendous honor and privilege to get to tell this story. I mean, truly. What was really wonderful the whole way through, I've been able to participate in the journey and the crafting of April's story, of her faith journey. When they decided to make my character a Christian back in end of season 8, Shonda Rhimes actually said, we would love your input. The only thing I care about is telling an authentic story. I don't want to tell a one-dimensional Christian story. You have grown up in it. You know it. Please pitch us stories. Let us know if anything doesn't feel right, if any of the language doesn't feel right. Talk to us. I mean, there was even like when my character was dating the Matthew, they called my dad to ask about what marriage counseling, premarital counseling looked like and felt like. And then they named the pastor who married me Reverend Drew in the actual, and then my actual dad walked me down the aisle as April's dad. I mean, it was just so crazy, but like they consulted with him because they said, we want to know what this experience is and we want to tell it well. And so to have a group of writers that were really, really open to not going down the direction that a lot of shows do in television. There just aren't. April's kind of one of a kind on television in terms of telling a story about a Christian that isn't one-dimensional, where she isn't the butt of every joke, where she isn't the judgmental, crazy lunatic, where she isn't like on the verge of a cult situation. It's someone who's really just trying to live out a faithful life and trying to be a loving human and failing and having to apologize and
also competent.
And it was, yes, she was actually also smart. Yeah. And competent and incredibly good at her job. I mean, they're all of those things. So it was a tremendous privilege to get to be a part of the telling of her story. And I was, but it was also a burden, because there is a sense of, you're representing a giant community of people who are profoundly underrepresented. They're not underrepresented in lots of other areas in our country, but in Hollywood, they are profoundly underrepresented, at least the authentic ones that I know that I engage with on a regular basis. So it was an honor. I think what was really cool about the episode where April is kind of brought back to life by this dying rabbi is that the writer of that episode, Elizabeth Finch, has become over the years a dear friend. And we've had so many deep conversations about Judaism and Christianity and our various different faith journeys. And we've developed a really loving relationship. And so she was tasked with the job of writing the episode where April has the return to faith moment. And it was her pitch to have it come from the voice of a rabbi. And I thought it was so brilliant. And I thought the way she structured it was so beautiful, this massive 11-page scene. But as she asked me, I remember the conversation very clearly. She, as she was writing the episode, she said, what would a believer need to hear to bring them back? Help me understand. And what does a Christian need to hear that could make sense of the problem of pain? And my response was, they need to know that, happiness all the time is not a guarantee for a faithful life. But they need to know above all else is what they need to know above all else is that God is not indifferent to their pain, and I added this other thing that didn't get added in, but that they have a brother in Jesus who has walked every possible road they can possibly imagine in regards to suffering, and he's done it all. He's done it all already. And so when you are in the midst of suffering and pain, you're not alone. There's no way you can ever be fully alone. You have a suffering brother who loves you and has walked with you. And so that was my, and also suffering is kind of like a guarantee. That was the other thing. Is like, there's so much in the Bible about what to do with suffering, which says to me that nobody has promised that you're just going to live a smooth, happy, conflict-free life. If you have faith, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be really, really rough crap that you're going to have to weather in some way. And so the question is, do you allow people in to help you? Do you allow God in to walk with you? Or do you try to go at it alone? Or do you measure your faith against the amount of suffering you have? Because I think a lot of Christians do that. A lot of people do that. They're like, if I live a good life, that means things should go well. Why are things not going well? That must mean God isn't good. But what you do when you do that is that you put yourself in the place of power as if it's up to you to create your universe. And it's just not up to us. Horrible things just happen, it's
what
true.
A beautiful message that is, even to our military and first responder community, because it is something that I think that I don't want to say that our community wrestles with that more than anybody else, because we all go through various levels of suffering, various levels of just challenging our faith and trying to figure out who is God and who am I, and how do I do this thing called marriage, and how does that challenge our faith too? There's so many things that all of us go through. But I think since I work so heavily within that community, I think that is a huge question that everybody has to wrestle with, because so many of our first responders, and that's why I think it's ironic to, maybe not ironic, but the fact that your history with Grey's Anatomy really does tie in a lot with our first responder, because I actually include a lot of our emergency room workers, a lot of our medical professionals with those first responders.
Yeah, absolutely.
The tragedy and trauma and things that everybody experiences, we typically see the worst of humanity, whether it's on a daily basis or during deployments or whatever. And so having to ask those deep questions is crucial for those next steps of our own health, of, like you said earlier, our self-care. And I just want to say thank you for doing such a great job. The writing was unbelievable. Please pass that along.
I will.
And just tell them that scene alone will be used over and over again to work, I think, with military and first responders, and letting us talk about, we have to embrace that level and the variable of suffering in our lives. And I think this is not about bashing or anything, but in the Protestant world, we typically do kind of have this measuring stick, like you mentioned, where it's very easy for us to go, but if I have God, then I'm not going to struggle so much. And he didn't promise that. And so we have to almost embrace suffering, at least the suffering we can't control. And say, how is this going to be part of my journey? How am I going to resolve this in my heart and in my mind so that my faith can grow?
Yeah, and I will say what was also really cool about that particular episode is I had people writing into me after that episode aired from every different walk of life you could possibly imagine. I had Muslims, I had Jewish people, I had Christians, I had atheists, agnostics, I had people who were just, very spiritual people, and then people who don't consider themselves spiritual people. And I had everyone tweeting at me going, I've been stuck. And this moment unstuck me. And I've started a healing process because of what happened with April. Like, I just, it's so extraordinary. And I was, texting my writer friend, Elizabeth, who wrote it, just to be like, you have no idea what you've done. I mean, it's so extraordinary, the impact that this story has been able to have on the lives of so many people. And I know she feels it too. She was getting a lot of love too, but she was so it was so encouraging for her to hear that too. But that for me was, the most extraordinary thing when a story about someone struggling with pain, struggling with suffering, and struggling with their faith transcends all of the boundaries of faith systems and backgrounds and speaks a universal truth. Mm-hmm. That builds bridges between communities that are many times at each other's throats or just can't see eye to eye, and like, if I can do anything in my life, I feel like my greatest calling is to be a bridge builder, because we're so polarized. And yeah.
We are. And so thank you for doing that and doing it so well. You have an incredible amount of favor, and the opportunity and influence that you have. I can say you've done well. You've done well. And so I know that what we're here to do is to talk about this also another amazing thing that's happening, which I could honestly do a whole episode on just that one clip. You're right. There's so much that can be unpacked. Even just various parts of that character. That's for another time. But just well done. And thank you for finishing well. And huge respect to Chanda for helping you to finish well and letting that character finish well. I know there was a lot of people that just really enjoyed it. And I especially during a couple of days of binging on my own of self-care, enjoyed that as well. So,
thank you.
So another huge thing happening for you is that you walked into the producing role of Indivisible, the movie that we were talking about with Heather and Darren Turner. So yes, you played Heather as well, but talk to everybody a little bit about the role of being a producer, and why was this story in particular something that stood out to you?
Well, yeah. So I met Darren Mormon, who is the producer on the film as well. I was pitching him a book that I had optioned, and halfway through, or he let me finish my pitch. He's like, "That sounds great, but let me pitch you on this." And he sent me the script, and I was like, I'm excited to get into to dip my toes into this idea of producing, and I would love to be a part of every piece of the process. I want to give script notes. I want to help cast it. I want to be on set with headphones. I want to give notes while we're shooting. I also want to understand what it feels like to really be in the position of leadership. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize how intensely alive I feel when I'm in a space of leadership. That I realize I've been saying the last 3 projects I've had outside of Grey's, I have been able to have that role, and I feel like I am operating out of my created self when I'm in a position where I can set the tone and lead with love and be an empowering and encouraging force. Because it really does, it allows for an entire community of people to have a positive experience when you have the person who's in the leadership role lifting everyone up. And so that was really fun for me. I didn't also realize that walking into this, I would get bit by the director bug. I thought that directing was going to be too overwhelming for me, the idea of trying to hold all the information in my head and think about every character, and then also think about how you shoot something, and think about set pieces and wardrobe and all of these things. And I found that I took to it pretty naturally, that it was something that I was already thinking about anyway. I just needed to speak aloud the things that were rolling around in my brain. So it was a wonderfully exciting and empowering and delightful time. I got to bring all my friends onto the film. I cast so many of my dear friends. We had an incredible crew. People just worked so hard, and it was a very joyful set, very, very joyful set. So that was really fun.
Was one of the questions, obviously, was, did you have a part in bringing in Justin Bruning? And
I cast them all.
Yes. Well, obviously you have incredible chemistry with all of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about doing a movie with people that you love and know well. It's like you you don't have to work at the chemistry aspect of it. It's just already there and it's already vibrant. And I thought of him, and we brought him in, and he read with me. He didn't even realize I was playing the role. He thought I was just producing it. He didn't know. And then he read the scenes once with the reader, and then I was like, I'm gonna get up and do it with you. And he was like, oh, all right. He like took his jacket off. He's like, we're gonna get down and dirty. Okay, let's go. I didn't even know this was happening. So that was really, really fun. And then I remember where I was when I offered Jason George the role, and I remember I got to actually call Sky Marshall to tell her she got the part. I brought her in because she'd done a guest spot on Grey's. She's an Air Force vet, and I remembered hanging out with her, talking about Air Force stuff. And I was like, she would be amazing in this role. And then I got Michael O'Neill, who played the shooter in.
Yes, there's a lot of comments. About that.
Yeah.
Like, how is the guy that was shooting up the hospital now like the head chaplain? But it works.
Because he's an actor and he's playing a different character. And I knew that he would bring a strength and a vulnerability and an honesty to that role. And so like a lot of the friends, came and did it for less than their quotes just because they were like excited to jump on board and do something with their friends, So it was so much fun. And what drew me also to the story, that was another part of your question, is I saw my own marriage story in their story. My husband and I went through a very dark time in our marriage, about 7 years into, or 5 years into our marriage. I guess it was like the 7-year itch. But before we had kids, and it was extremely dark and painful, and I did not know if we would survive. And I it's a big, long story, but we went through counseling, and we really both chose to fight for it. I felt wildly hopeless in the midst of it. And I remember talking to my dad and just sobbing, and him saying to me, just because a situation feels hopeless doesn't mean that it is hopeless. So get into counseling right now. You've uncovered a bunch of stuff and you've been sitting on it for weeks, and it's just been festering and nothing. You need to bring it into the light with someone who can help the two of you sort this stuff out. And that's the thing, what I was really connecting to in the military family aspect of the marriage story is that what I was learning is that when these guys experience the kind of trauma they experience, and then they come home, they don't know how to bring that into the light, and I think that at least that was what my understanding was of what happens in some of these marriages, is that they don't have the words to articulate. They want to protect their spouses from the pain that they witness. They don't know how to speak about it. And then the spouses feel more and more isolated. And then they feel more and more isolated. And then you feel like you've lost your best friend who used to talk to you about everything, because this person is no longer talking to you or communicating about the deepest stuff that's going on. And I think, and there's shame, I think, too. There's shame because they want to be strong for their families. They want to be able to just handle it and be soldiers and soldier through it. And the truth is, it's too much. Yeah. It's too much for one person, human being, to soldier through the kind of trauma that they experience over there. It's too much. And to expect that of yourself is not reasonable. And I, in my marriage story, I felt very much like I couldn't bring the painful things into light because I was ashamed of looking like I couldn't succeed at my marriage. I was ashamed. I was ashamed of my community looking at me like I was a failure. I was ashamed that things didn't feel like I thought they were supposed to feel. And so I bottled stuff up for a really long time, until it came to like an exploding point. And when really, if I had literally just brought the stuff into light as it was happening, it could be on the table. We could address it. We could move through it together. So anyway, that was what I connected to. What I really unpacked in therapy with my husband was pulling that shame out, like trying to eliminate the shame, pull all the stuff out into the light, and figure out a way to navigate to learn each other's love languages, to figure out how to care for one another, how to receive the love that they were giving when it wasn't natural for us to me to receive love that way, and vice versa. And we came out the other side in this much more brilliant light and this deep, sweet friendship and love that I didn't even know was possible beforehand. So I've always wanted to tell a story about a couple really fighting for their marriage and coming out on the other side with hope and joy. And this story provided that opportunity for me.
So one of the things that drew me into really, I mean, we are a chaplain family, but also looking into how chaplain families are doing, how some of our senior officers are doing. And I won't get into the details of it, but I did some research and I found that as military families go up in rank, as the soldiers go up in rank, the higher leadership roles that you take on. I think in society, not just in the military, but the more leadership you take on, the more you're put in the spotlight, the more pressures that you put on your shoulders or carry in order to do your job or to serve people or whatever, the more I think we have that shame factor, I think. I think that I'm not saying that other people don't experience shame. I think we all do. And it's a complete lie, right? Brene Brown talks about it being the swamp.
I love Brene Brown.
Well, I love Brene Brown.
Yeah.
About it, right? Like she's like, the common phrase around the house all the time. But, you know, she talks about it being the swampland of the soul. It's unproductive. It's a lie. And I think that we all can wrestle with that. But there's something about, and that's what's wonderful about this movie is that, and I want to say thank you for choosing this couple because, you know, even my husband and I, when we were sharing our story of just struggling in our own marriage and how what that's been like, that we had so many people that came to us and said, you guys are struggling?
Yeah.
Like we didn't even think about how the chaplain might be handling this, or we may not even think about how the commander's marriage is, or, you know, whatever that leadership role is. And I imagine that was probably a similar feeling that you had when you talked about what the community's opinion would be, right?
I'm a pastor's kid.
Oh, that's not help. That's like compiling it all together.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I grew up in that space of like watching my parents have a hard time finding people to lean on. Yeah. You know?
So that's huge, right? Like we have all these pressures that somehow get a seat at the table of our marriage and somehow like influence what we do in our communication and how we pursue each other. And so that was one of the biggest things that stood out to me was, number one, finally a beautiful movie that portrays a military couple. Number two, that you're sharing the story of a chaplain couple that so few people think to tell a story about a chaplain couple, but it's multi-layered. It's not just, I mean, any military family, any military couple can go to this movie and find things that they relate to. And to have those in leadership also see this movie and go, wow, this is what we experience from a leadership perspective of not wanting to be vulnerable and not wanting to talk about how difficult our marriage is or how difficult life is or the responsibilities of leadership even. And so we all kind of walk around with this, I shouldn't struggle. But I am, and I don't know what to do about that. So thank you for doing that. And I have to say, I was very nervous to see it, not only because I figured I would relate a lot to it, but you have this amazing scene that's not a spoiler. It's in the trailer. It's just the reason why I first saw this beautiful scene of you guys after a deployment in reintegration in the kitchen. And I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, I've had that conversation. I don't know if I can see it. And I have to say, number one, that shows just how well the acting and the chemistry is in this movie, how authentic the script is, how authentic the storyline is. I know the Turners are supportive of it as well and have backed it up. And you also had the daughter that is in the movie with you that plays your daughter. I think it's Samala. Is that right? Is her name?
Samara Lee. Yes, Samara. Yeah.
She is a military kid, right? And her dad was deployed when you guys were actually filming.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you guys went through a lot of work to make sure that this was authentic and really pouring your heart and soul into it. I know we have a few minutes left, so a couple of questions. One, what did you pull from Heather's story in particular, or Heather, in figuring out how to portray that character as a military spouse and as a chaplain spouse? Surely you pull from being a pastor's kid too in there. But,
I mean, honestly, they just feel so like similar in some ways. she has a hard time allowing anyone else to take care of her. And she's been there, not necessarily, at least on the pages of the script. I met Heather herself a week into shooting for the first time. So there's the essence of their story is on the screen. And then there's a lot of stuff that's been fictionalized. And so anyway, what I really connected to was this whole, it felt very like pastor's wife. It felt very much like a pastor's wife sort of story where you feel like I should have it all together because I am in this position of leadership. She has this moment with the two women at the end, and they've both gone through something big, and she's sort of folding laundry. And I add a lot of those things, like she needs to be doing things for other people all the time, because that feels very authentic to what it is to be, a pastor's wife. That feels authentic to me. So we can't just be sitting around having coffee. She needs to be folding the baby's laundry. She's come over to clean up or help or offer support, even though she's going through the worst thing she's ever experienced in her life. They're talking about their pain, and she, instead of immediately offering her own peace and vulnerability, she's just looking out the window until the other women go, talk to us. Our pain doesn't negate your pain. We're all experiencing pain right now. Let us in, and she said, she has this, oh, please don't worry about me. That felt like, I just know what that is. I know what that experience is. And I don't know what to do about it. I mean, honestly, I don't know what to do about it for like the lives of pastors' wives and people in leadership. And
well, I think you said it a few minutes ago. I think you modeling as a human being, your understanding of how important it is to be vulnerable. Yeah. And I think that you modeled that on screen very well too, by just going, you know what? Yeah, this is hard. And I am having a bad day. And, or sometimes I do need counseling, or I do need to take care of myself. And there is something wonderful in all of us as human beings of serving one another, but also recognizing that if we don't take care of ourselves and acknowledge the truth of what's actually going on in us, and like you said, bringing that out into the light, even if that means more regularly and not piling it up on the inside, then we're more likely to not fall apart.
Yeah, right?
So
Exactly.
I think that that's huge. I know, I also wanted to ask you, was there anything about filming, because filming a military movie can be a big risk, right? There's so many, so many of us military spouses are still learning acronyms and regulations and that sort of thing. So I can only imagine you just kind of jumped in the deep end there. Was there anything surprising to you in the process of filming or about military life that stood out to you?
Anything surprising? I mean, it was all a pretty unfamiliar world to me. So, I mean, I would say there was a lot that was surprising. But also, like, what's interesting about this film, one of my good friends went and saw a screening of it the other night, and she goes, this military film is unlike any other military film. Like a lot of other military films, there's just a lot of like explosions and blood and guts and PTSD and misery and, just like death, and more pain and suffering. And she said, this was such an internal story. Yeah. And we've never seen that. Right. So for me, I could say there are all these regulation things about the military that I wasn't familiar with, but actually the real matter that we were working in this movie was an interpersonal spiritual journey. And that I'm familiar with, you know? So that stuff I could find empathy in, because I could see the world through all the different characters' eyes. Because we were telling such an internal story. It was almost like the military aspect was the setting for, and it, it's a really intense, like high stress level setting to tell a story about deep internal vulnerable things that I'm familiar with, I guess.
And I do want to say, because I know we're going to have to close out here, you're going to have to go here in just a second. I just want to say that is the reason that everybody should go see this movie, because it is so unlike any other military film that you've seen. And it's such an internal, vulnerable story of what our families and our couples are really going through. It's worth it. Even if you're not a military family, you'll see your own story in this. Sarah, in closing, I have one just kind of fun question to close on. Because this is kind of a girl moment, and because your dress for the Creative Arts Emmys was so amazing, and we have so many military spouses that regularly have to get ready for military balls all the time, would you mind, just for the fun of it, give us one tip that you figured out on getting ready for a formal event that you would say, hands down, every time, this is what I do? I know this is so superficial, but
no, it's great. A tip for what to do. I mean, I will say, if I have little fold up flat shoes, like little ballet slippers,
yes, that
can fit in a purse. And I will say, I mean, that's just a tool that I bring with me, because my feet want to kill me by, hour 2 or whatever. And sometimes I just got to take the heels off and just got to dance in the slippers that can fold into my purse.
Perfect. That's perfect. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for doing this movie. Congratulations on so many new things. Congratulations also on taking some time for you and for your family, for your kids. By the way, great speech at UVA, was also very vulnerable and very powerful. So thank you so much for your time. I'm encouraging everybody watching or listening to please go and see this movie. I know that she's put her heart and soul into it, and so many other people have as well. I think we'll all find our own story reflected. So Sarah, thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing more from you and seeing more of what's going to come from you creatively and what God is doing in your life. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.